Hey, everybody, and good evening from my home in Durango, Colorado. Hope you can all see and hear me clearly. I have changed my audio setup a little bit, audio and visual. Once again, I was given a beautiful iPhone 12 for Christmas, so that's what I'm using on Facebook. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'm using my iPad and also a little bit higher quality microphone that I have plugged into that. So I figured now that the holidays are over and we're all in the depths of winter, I figured that we would take a trip to the sunny South and do some of the classic jazz that came out of New Orleans. I haven't played much of this in a while, so figured it'd be a fun thing to do tonight. Kind of take away our cares and yeah, hey Wayne, yeah, good. I'm glad. Looks like good picture quality tonight. That could have to do with my new phone. It really is amazing the quality of the cameras and microphones on the new iPhones. But anyway, that first piece of music was actually the first published piece written by Jelly Roll Morton, the self-proclaimed inventor of jazz, who was from New Orleans, as he said it. And that's the original Jelly Roll Blues. It was published in 1915. One of my favorites of all of his pieces. I haven't played a whole lot of his music over the last couple of years, so I am doing at least 3 of them tonight that I know by heart and learned a new one for tonight's broadcast. But anyhow, you know, a lot of people are familiar with Jelly Roll Morton, but I wanted to play 2 songs for you by the man who was supposedly his biggest inspiration. He was a black pianist from New Orleans, later moved to Chicago, named Tony Jackson. And he was known during his lifetime as the world's greatest single-handed entertainer. That's quite a compliment. And sadly, he died in 1921. He died of the hiccups, believe it or not, and died in 21 and did not leave any hand-played player piano rolls or phonograph records, but he was supposedly one of the very greatest of all the ragtime and jazz pianists that came out of New Orleans. And he had one hit song, And supposedly this was written while he was still in New Orleans, but it was published after he had moved to Chicago, came out in 1916, and it's called Pretty Baby. A lot of people still know that. And I play it with the original verse to the song, which is not in the sheet music, but I'll tell you a little more about that in a minute. For now, here's Pretty Baby by Tony Jackson. Pretty Baby by Tony Jackson. Thank you very much, folks. Incidentally, since we're just starting the stream, please share this on Facebook or social media. If you can do that for me, I would sure appreciate it. I want to try and get as many people, new audience members, that is, watching as possible. Anybody who might be interested in this kind of music, ragtime and old jazz. We're doing a lot of that tonight. And I have a very unusual connection with the pianist that I'm telling you about, Tony Jackson. My friend Johnny Maddox, who was the great ragtime revivalist in the 1950s, befriended an old black piano player in Chicago named Glover Compton. And Glover had been a close friend of Tony Jackson. And like I said, Tony Jackson never made any records, but there is one surviving taped interview of Glover Compton, and he plays that original verse to that song, famous song, which was never otherwise published. And he also recorded this song, which Glover did, which I absolutely love. I always have. Johnny used to play it. And it's called Some Sweet Day. It's another one of Tony Jackson's songs, which was published just 1 year later, in 1917. And I know the verse to that one too. And so I will go ahead and play that for you now. A little tribute to one of the great early New Orleans ragtime pianists. Here's Some Sweet Day. Yeah, Some Sweet Day. Thank you, everybody. Isn't that a wonderful song? I wish I could sing it for you, but you don't even want to hear me try. um, that's a little tribute to Tony Jackson and also his friend Glover Compton, who was he was interviewed for the book They All Played Ragtime. You can read all about Glover and Tony Jackson in that book. Hey, Bernie, yes, I am planning on King Porter's Stomp. I just learned that in the last week or two, and it's always been one of my favorites, but I've never performed it before, so you'll all get to hear it tonight. But I might save that for a little bit later in the program. And I've got a few pieces of sheet music out here on the piano, which are some of the really rare and very special pieces to me from my own collection. And I'll show you this one now. There's a little bit of a story behind it. This is a famous song written by two of the great African-American New Orleans songwriters, Spencer Williams and Clarence Williams. And this is the first edition, which was printed in large format, which is very unusual. By the time this song came out in 1919, they had gone to smaller paper size for sheet music, but it's called I Ain't Gonna Give Nobody None of This Jelly Roll. The music cover obviously is not politically correct, but I'm just so thrilled to have this early edition of the song. It has become a Dixieland jazz standard without a doubt. And I found an original copy of this on eBay a couple of years ago and paid over $500 for it. And it was lost in the mail. The post office lost it. I got the package and it was completely empty. But I was lucky enough that it was insured by eBay. So I got the money back, and then lo and behold, I found another copy. I have hardly ever seen the original copy of this piece. But anyhow, let me play it for you. I ain't gonna give nobody none of this jelly roll. Hey, thank you so much. I ain't gonna give nobody none of this jelly roll. I'm reading the comments on Facebook, incidentally. I mentioned this before, it's kind of hard to read them on YouTube at the same time. A lady named Kathy was talking about the lyrics to this song. It's really not very appropriate even by today's standards, but it's kind of funny. I thought I'd read it to you. Anyway, I ain't gonna give nobody none of this jelly roll. I wouldn't give you a piece of this cake to save your soul. My ma told me today when she went away, if I'd be a good boy, she'd bring me a toy. I am her pride and joy. Now, there ain't no use for you to keep on hanging round. I love you, but I hate to turn you down. This jelly roll is sweet. It's surely hard to beat. I know you want it. You can't have it because I ain't going to give you none. That's how it goes. Anyway, that's one of my prized possessions and a great song, which has been recorded by a lot of famous artists over the years. Some of these Dixieland jazz standards, for instance, this one has been done by Western swing bands. Willie Nelson has recorded that song. And, I know what we'll do next. Here's a ragtime piece that is authentic rag out of New Orleans. You probably rarely ever hear this. And it was written again by Clarence Williams, who was probably the most important publisher for African American musicians for decades, many decades actually. Started in New Orleans and then moved to, eventually wound up in New York. And, oh, thank you, Marilyn. I'm reading Marilyn's comment. She's talking about Johnny Maddox. I mentioned him earlier, and I'll definitely be playing some of the songs that I learned through him tonight. This one, I don't think I ever played it for Johnny, actually. It's called The Wildflower Rag from 1916 by Clarence Williams. And Clarence Williams made a number of piano solo records. They're not real flashy, but I always loved them. Johnny told me he loved them too. And he made a record of this, Wildflower Rag, with real sort of beautiful blues on the other side. I think it's called the Organ Grinder Blues. And the first person to play that record for me was my friend Joe Bussard, who's one of the world's leading 78 record collectors, who lives outside of Frederick, Maryland. And hearing that in his basement was really quite an experience. It was like Clarence Williams was just sitting there in the room playing the piano for you. So that's one of the reasons I was inspired to learn this. And if anybody knows where I can find a good copy of that 78 record, the only one I have is pretty in bad condition, let's put it that way, but you can still hear it all right. Here's the Wildflower Rag. Wildflower Rag, yes. Real ragtime from New Orleans, one of Clarence Williams' earliest pieces from 1916. Well, I'm going to do all kinds of things for you tonight, and if you have requests, go ahead and send them in, although I've got a few that I received ahead of time, and I'm going to try and play them for you for sure. A couple of songs that I already knew, and let's see, what's next on my list? I make out lists for these shows. I don't always stick to them, but well, I wanted to mention the term Dixieland because a lot of people use that to refer to this style of jazz. And I didn't really know where it came from for a long time. And then I realized that the famous band that made the records that are widely considered the first recordings of jazz was called the Original Dixieland Jazz Band because they were from New Orleans, which was Dixieland. That's what it was called in those days. And so I think that's probably the genesis of the term, and therefore it dates back to the original period. They started making records in 1917, and so it's not a bad term to use. And even though all of the musicians in the band, I think, Henry Ragus, Tony Sparborough, who was a drummer, and later on the pianist with that band was J. Russell Robinson, but anyhow, they were all, except for Robinson, they were all from New Orleans, and then played in Chicago and made records in New York. And but it's therefore it would still be appropriate to play some of their music tonight. You know, New Orleans jazz, and I do one of their pieces that is really great. It's not one of the more famous ones today. Most famous one they recorded was Tiger Rag. I'll play that for you later, but for now, let's do Blue in the Blues. This is from 1919 by the Original Dixieland Jazz Band. Blue in the Blues. Yeah, that's Blue in the Blues by the Original Dixieland Jazz Band. Thank you so much, everybody. I guess I'll do a virtual bow. And by the way, I don't think I mentioned yet, I am trying to do this for a living, and so virtual tip information is on both the Facebook posts and the YouTube postings in the comments, and if you're inclined to do that, I sure appreciate it. So far, it's been working all right for me, but this county here in Colorado is still totally shut down. This is this is about the only thing I really get to look forward to is doing these virtual concerts for everybody. So I sure appreciate you all watching. I know a lot of the same people do every week too, and I'm very grateful. Um, let's see, what else is on my list? Oh yeah, let's do another hot New Orleans jazz tune, and this one dates from after the sort of Dixieland jazz era started. This is from 1922, still early in the period. And I believe it was written by A.J. Piron, who was a music publisher from New Orleans. He wrote the famous High Society March, which I'll play for you later. But somebody correct me if I'm wrong about that. I don't know why I can't remember tonight. But it's a famous song. It's called I Wish I Could Shimmy Like My Sister Kate. And a lot of jazz bands play this at a fairly medium or slow tempo. And I like it to fairly up tempo, and in fact, I play it the way that Johnny Maddox used to play it, which is pretty fast. And I just like it that way. So here's I Wish I Could Shimmy Like My Sister Kate, probably the most famous song about the shimmy dance, which was a scandal of the 20s. But anyhow, here's the song. I wish I could shimmy like my sister Kate. Oh, Kathy says she knows that one too. Oh, isn't that great? Yeah. Oh, well, now here's another one of the pieces of sheet music on my piano tonight. I pulled all of these out a couple of days ago, just getting ready for tonight's concert. And this one belonged to Johnny. This came from his collection. It's a very rare piece. And 1917, I believe. Yep, that's exactly right. You can tell it was Johnny's music because he put tape all inside here. Ah! But anyway, this is a very unusual rag. It's one of the most unique in the whole ragtime repertoire. Reminds me of a few other pieces, kind of like Lily Rag in that way, because it's totally unique and just odd and wonderful and original at the same time. And 1917 was right at the time that ragtime was turning into jazz, or had evolved into jazz in the commercial sense. And you can see that at that time, the terms really were not very specific. So, you know, early jazz, blues, and ragtime are all essentially the same thing. Just read the title of the music. It's called Triangle Jazz Blues, and the subtitle says Rag and Foxtrot, like the Foxtrot dance. So whether this is really a piano rag is how I would classify it, but that's not important. You all just probably want to hear it. This piece was revived in the 1950s by one of the greatest ragtime pianists, Wally Rose, and so I play it similar to the way that he did it. And there's one more thing I want to tell you about this piece too, the Triangle Jazz Blues. I remember that when I visited the music historian David Jason, he told me that he went to New Orleans and saw or met the composer of this piece, Erwin LeClaire, and that the way that he played it had all kinds of things in it that were not in the printed music. So very improvisatory, in other words. So I've always remembered that comment. I think it's interesting. I play it kind of the way Wally Rose did it. The Triangle Jazz Blues. Triangle Jazz Blues. Whether it's blues or jazz or rag, I don't know. I assume it was named for the music publishing company. See down here, Triangle Music Company. So that's one of the neat pieces, really, of the New Orleans ragtime repertoire. So, I don't know if my friend Craig is watching from Australia right now, but he requested a couple of pieces more of Jelly Roll Morton, and I'm going to do them for you now. In fact, I got to play this with Craig Mitten's Ragtime Orchestra when I was touring in Australia. That was one of the great concerts I was able to do over there. And this is called The Pearls by Jelly Roll Morton. Hey, good. He's watching. Oh, that's great. We're going to do The Pearls. And I learned this off the player piano roll of Jelly Roll Morton, which was probably made in the early to mid-20s. I'd guess about 1924 or something like that. And the piano roll, a friend of mine recut the roll so that I could learn it. You know, I just learn it right off the roll here on this piano. That's how I do it. And it has a very unusual device in it, a musical rhythm that is just completely unusual. We're in the second section of the piece, and he does a stop time effect on the fourth beat of the measure, then skips the first beat of the next one. So see if you can hear that while you listen to The Pearls by Jelly Roll Morton. There's The Pearls by Jelly Roll Morton. Thank you, folks. Oh, how interesting, David. Yeah. Uh, Too bad you didn't actually get to meet Erwin LeClaire. And I saw a couple of requests there. Wayne, I'm sorry, I don't know Stumbling by heart, but I can learn it. I'll do it on a future broadcast for you. that Jelly Roll Morton is, that's um, the most authentic jazz that came out of New Orleans. Really, is the stuff that he played. I think he got a lot of his style from Tony Jackson, if I had to guess. And he could tell wonderful tales too. If you want to learn a lot about Jelly Roll Morton, listen to the recordings that he made at the Library of Congress in 1938. He didn't live to be very old. He died in the early 40s, 1941, I believe. But we're so lucky that we have these records he made at the Library of Congress in 1938, and he talks about, all the characters, the piano players, ragtimers, blues players that he used to know down in the South in the early 1900s, and even Jelly Roll Morton even spent time in St. Louis and met Scott Joplin. And let me play for you now a piece which I've just learned this in the last week or two, and I've never played it before, but I've always loved it, and it's Jelly Roll Morton's first great showpiece called the King Porter Stomp. And I've learned it off of his piano roll that he made in the 20s, although he claimed that he wrote this back in like 1905. Not unlike U.B. Blake, they found out that he was a few years younger than he said he was, according to the census records. So he could spin tales, but it's just a wonderful piece. He said he named it for a piano player named Porter King. And so he switched the name backwards. It's the King Porter Stomp. And you all can stomp your feet if you want. I'm not going to do that because I have a problem with the video a little bit. I know that it shakes, particularly on the YouTube channel. If I'm not careful, shouldn't stomp my feet that much anyway. But here's the King Porter Stomp, and this piece is important for another reason too, which is that it was one of the first swing records ever made by Benny Goodman's orchestra, 1935. Fletcher Henderson did the arrangement, and you can't pinpoint the beginning of the big band era exactly, but the record that he made of King Porter Stomp, where the whole band essentially improvises on the trio over and over, is widely considered one of the first swing records. So there's another little tidbit of history, and now the King Porter Stomp by Jelly Roll Morton. folks, the King Porter Stomp. All right, let's see. Well, I need to play something a little bit slower after that. So I wanted to mention the great trumpet player from New Orleans, King Oliver. And King Oliver's Creole Jazz Band, which made wonderful acoustic records in the early 20s, almost 100 years ago now. And of course, Louis Armstrong got his start, became well known from playing with King Oliver. And I don't think I know any of his music by heart, any of the songs that he recorded. I could be wrong. Johnny used to play Sugarfoot Stomp, and that was one of the King Oliver numbers. He had 2 original copies of the sheet music to that, and I didn't wind up getting either one of them, unfortunately. It's probably a pretty rare piece, I think. But anyhow, I do know another piece of music about King Oliver. His real name was Joe Oliver, and I learned this off a player piano roll too. A piano roll played by Clarence Johnson, who was one of the great blues artists from Chicago. And I don't know if this piece of music was ever published. I kind of doubt it. It just appeared on this piano roll. And it's called the Joe Oliver Blues. And the composition itself was written by Thomas A. Dorsey, not the trombone player, the famous band leader Tommy Dorsey, but Thomas Dorsey, who was a African-American songwriter in the 20s, made blues records under the name of Georgia Tom Dorsey, and later became a very famous religious writer of religious music, Christian hymns and so forth. But and his most famous piece in the 20s was his biggest hit, so to speak, was a number called "It's Tight Like That," which was done by a lot of jazz bands. That's a little bit about Thomas Dorsey, and this is a piece he wrote called the Joe Oliver Blues, as played by Clarence Jelly Johnson. So in tribute to King Oliver from New Orleans, the Joe Oliver Blues. Thank you very much, everybody. That's the Joe Oliver Blues. And maybe you noticed it has a really neat tag on the ending of the piano roll that ends in an off key, catches people by surprise. And I saw one fellow, Ken from Australia, asking about the difference between a stomp and a ragtime piece. If you listen to Jelly Roll Morton describe it, he said, I don't know what the name stomp means myself. And other than the fact that people would stomp their feet when he played that kind of music. His music is definitely more improvisatory than the ragtime era, but they are very closely related styles, and so that's really the only difference. And as I mentioned, I had some requests ahead of time. I'm going to try and get to those. And one of them, I'll go ahead and play it now. Another request from Australia, believe it or not. Funny, I have so many people watching over there. Yeah, David, yeah, that is just like Jimmy Yancey, isn't it? He ended everything in E flat. um, well, and this request doesn't necessarily fit the theme of the Tonight Show per se, but I thought I'd play it anyway. One of the great influences on New Orleans music was French styles. And so here is a beautiful French waltz that I learned this after hearing Johnny Maddox play it. It was also very popular in the United States, and it was recorded by John Philip Sousa's band, believe it or not, and it's called Amoureuse, a French waltz from about 1900. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much, everyone. Amarous by Rudolphe Berger. Dave, if you look that up, you should be able to find Amarous pretty easily. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Marilyn. Yeah, it's a gorgeous piece of music. I play it more like a concert waltz than Sousa's band did. If you listen to their record, you know, it's strict tempo and it, it was played for dancing in those days, but it's so beautiful. That's how I play it. And thank you, everybody. Once or twice during the broadcast, I remind everybody the virtual tip jar is open. Information is in the YouTube video and Facebook video in the comments and so forth. I sure appreciate you all still doing that. I don't know when I'm going to get to play in public again, but I'm still enjoying this. And I'll probably continue doing it even after some of the, regular concerts and things that I do open up. In fact, a friend of mine made an interesting suggestion because these broadcasts are seen, all over the world. He said that I should reach out and ask people if they know about anyone booking real concerts, because even before the pandemic began, it was hard to make a living doing this, and the virtual broadcasts have helped, but I could use more real engagements even after, when and if the world returns to normal. What I really love to do most is just play piano concerts myself, and preferably in nice places, rather than in a bar. Or the only bar that I really love is the Diamond Bell Saloon here in Durango, because the audiences are fun tourists that often it'd surprise you how much they know about this kind of vintage music. But and the Texans all know the songs from Texas that I play that come up here. But anyway, I would be very interested in doing a little more in the future as far as concert work. I've had trouble over the years getting myself booked into major jazz festivals instead of the ragtime festivals, which the few that are left are really very small events. I don't know if it's because the style of jazz I play is just very, very old, or if it's my whole persona. I don't know. They don't think of me as a jazz musician, but I'm certainly doing a lot of that tonight. Speaking of New Orleans music, yeah, who knows? Amy's saying, hope you have made many new contacts for concerts when things open back up. So do I, and maybe if I mention it a few more times on the coming broadcasts, I'll make some contacts. We'll see. All right, yeah, time for an up-tempo jazz number. Brittany, tip sent. Thank you so much. This is from 1922, I believe, written by a great black songwriting duo, Creamer and Layton. The same guys that wrote After You've Gone and also Strut Miss Lizzie, which is a trad jazz standard. We're going to do Way Down Yonder in New Orleans, of course. And my rendition of it includes the verse and even the patter chorus. Here we go. you very much. Way Down Yonder in New Orleans. Again, written by the black songwriting duo Creamer and Leighton. Henry Creamer later wrote the famous If I Could Be With You 1 Hour Tonight with James P. Johnson. And Turner Leighton moved to England and became very famous as part of a harmony team over there called Leighton and Johnstone. And that was one of their biggest hits. I don't have the very first edition of it. The very first edition, I think, was printed with a Broadway show named after the song, Strut Miss Lizzie. And I'd love to find that if there's any sheet music collectors out there. And what else have we got tonight? Oh, yeah. Let me tell you all about a song now that is very, very special to me personally. And fairly simple song, a simple melody, but it has been recorded and performed for decades and decades. And this is the very first edition of it. Let me pull it out. If I was not in the safety of my own home, I would not be showing you the original copies of these things. This is called Trouble in Mind. It was written by a pianist from New Orleans named Richard M. Jones. And the first recording of it was made in 1924 by a fairly obscure blues singer with the composer at the piano. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the whole history of this song. It's unusual because it's an 8-bar blues instead of a 12-bar blues. And this sheet music has the verse in it, which I'll play for you tonight as well, which is not often heard. And Trouble in Mind was then recorded again about 2 years later by another famous blues singer, Chippy Hill, with Louis Armstrong on cornet and the composer, Richard M. Jones, on the piano. So Louis Armstrong was one of the first well-known people to make a record of that song that became famous. And, some songs are hits when they first come out, and then others take years and years to gain in popularity. And I think that was kind of the case with this song, Trouble in Mind. The words, the lyrics, trouble in mind, I'm blue, but I won't be blue always, because the sun's going to shine in my back door someday. And, those... Oh, and then it goes on. Let's see if I can remember the words. I'm going to lay my head on some lonesome railroad line and let the 219 train pacify my mind. Kind of sad, but it is a blues song after all. And I wrote down a list. I just did a little search on the internet. So if there are some of you who are not familiar with this song, you can understand its importance in history. And I do like to tell about the history of the music, obviously. I think it means more to people when I do that. So here is a list of people that have recorded or performed this song over the years that I found just with a simple, quick Google search. So I mentioned Louis Armstrong's one of the early ones. Then also Bob Wills and his Texas Playboys, Woody Herman and his orchestra, Tommy Dorsey and his orchestra. Found a video, believe it or not, of Tennessee Ernie Ford singing the song with Ethel Waters, Dinah Washington, Nina Simone, Fats Domino, the Rolling Stones, Merle Haggard, Jerry Lee Lewis, Willie Nelson, Aretha Franklin, and even Janis Joplin. So a lot of more contemporary artists who know their history have done this song. And I thought that would just show you kind of how important this song is. And this is the only original copy of the sheet music I have ever seen. Johnny Maddox called me on the phone one day and said, oh, guess what? I ran across my original copy of Trouble in Mind. And when Johnny went into a nursing home, I just begged him to give me this, and he did. And I'm so glad. This is not from the 20s when the first recordings were made. It's actually from 1937. It was probably printed in conjunction with Woody Herman's record of the piece, which came out that year and helped to repopularize the song. But and then I mentioned that it's real special to me as well, and this is because my grandmother could remember her father, it'd be my great-grandfather, singing this song and playing it on guitar when she was a little girl in Texas, which probably would have been in the late 1930s. And so my grandmother's really the first one that ever mentioned this song to me. And so anyhow, let me play it for you. Trouble in Mind. Thank you very much. Trouble in Mind by Richard M. Jones. Very, very famous song. I saw a request for Echo of Spring. Afraid I've never played that. I might do it on a future stride piano broadcast for you. And I've recorded that Trouble in Mind, by the way. And I did it with a Western Swing ensemble that a friend and I put together here in Durango, Colorado. And we sort of did it in the Bob Wills style. If I had to name a very favorite band of all time, it might well be Bob Wills and his Texas Playboys. But anyhow, let's get back to some of the New Orleans jazz. In fact, let's do my big New Orleans medley. This is the couple of the the top, I want to say number one, the top couple of New Orleans related pieces that I often play if I get requests for this kind of music. And anyway, these I learned this from Johnny Maddox. He made a medley out of these three pieces, which was great. It's the Basin Street Blues, about the famous Basin Street in New Orleans, which is actually from the early 30s, I believe, a little bit late in the period. Dixieland jazz was never really the same after about the early 1930s. And then after Basin Street, we'll do the Sugar Blues, which was written by Clarence Williams and made famous by the trumpet player Clyde McCoy. And Johnny had actually worked with him. And then to wind up the medley, very famous and actually beautiful song. It's a beautiful melody that I love. A famous song called Do You Know What It Means to Miss New Orleans? And that song was written really after the Dixieland jazz era had ended. It was sort of in between the big band era and the revival of Dixieland jazz that took place in the 50s. And it was written for a movie, a Hollywood movie in 1946. And the movie was called New Orleans. And there was a couple of songs written for the movie, but the one that became absolutely an enormous hit was Do You Know What It Means to Miss New Orleans? A sophisticated song with a bridge in a different key than the chorus of the song. Written by Louis Alter, who was a musician and composer that went back to the 20s, made player piano rolls. And the movie, New Orleans, I read up a bit on it before I watched it a couple of years ago, and the idea for it, which of course it features a lot of old-time jazz, the idea for it came from, darn it, the famous famous actor who did the movie Citizen Kane. Somebody help me in the comments here. Orson Welles had the idea for this movie. It took several years to finish. Louis Armstrong was in the movie, of course, and also Billie Holiday was one of the only major motion pictures that she made. And the boogie woogie piano player Meade Lux Lewis is even in the movie. And anyhow, here's my medley of these songs, all about New Orleans. Basin Street Blues. I was reading a couple of interesting comments there. Don is asking me how much space my sheet music takes up. Yeah, it is a lot of space. It's the entire master bedroom in my new house. Nothing but sheet music. And, as for the history of the rest of it, anyone can really learn about this stuff. All you have to do is look at the sheet music or watch the films and the movies. You can buy that movie, New Orleans, on DVD. All you got to do is spend some time on that, which is how I learn a lot of this stuff. I've got a few more things I want to play for you relating to the theme of tonight's show. And let's see. You know what I really need to do is When the Saints Go Marching In. So I have quite an arrangement of that, which is also inspired by Johnny Maddox. He did a great medley of several New Orleans traditional tunes from the early 1900s. And I don't really do many spirituals, but I might even do one for you tonight. I guess technically it's a hymn. We'll do Just a Closer Walk with Thee, and then When the Saints Go Marching In, one of the famous songs from New Orleans, and with that also the High Society March, which really goes well as a medley with When the Saints Go Marching In. That's how Johnny played it. And there's a couple of more in there too. We're going to do Down by the Riverside and Oh, Didn't He Ramble, which is one of the songs the jazz bands would play at the funerals in New Orleans in the early 1900s. I think that's, and also Down in Jungletown, another Dixieland jazz standard. So here's a whole medley of early New Orleans tunes, and starting out with Just a Closer Walk with Thee. the saints go marching in. Thank you very much, everybody. Dave, yeah, it does imitate a Chopin piece, I think. That's the High Society March, which is a famous piece that came out of New Orleans in the early 1900s. Saw a request for Mississippi Mud there. I played that on a real recent broadcast, so I don't think I'll do that tonight. But I tell you what I do need to do is I had a request ahead of time before tonight's concert for a song about the South that was not written in New Orleans, but I think I'll play it for you now, especially because I need a rest after that last one. And it's called When It's Sleepy Time Down South. For some reason, in the 20s and 30s, there was a huge craze for songs about the South. I don't think it was all really, politically incorrect like people today might think. I think it was largely about warm weather and friendly people. And a lot of the songs were written by African Americans and Jewish people from New York City that had never been to the South, like Gershwin and Swanee, for instance. But this song was written in Hollywood, of all places, Hollywood, California, in 1932, I believe. And the songwriter was a man named Clarence Muse, who was a black actor in many dozens of movies in the 1930s and 40s. And it was certainly the only real big hit he had as a songwriter. And one of my friends, I've met and corresponded with, or tried to meet, the few surviving actors from the 30s and 40s. One of them is a good friend of mine named Cora Sue Collins, who was a big child star in the 30s. Really, just about the only one left who really has vibrant memories of the period. And she made a movie with Clarence Muse, the man that wrote this song. And so I have a beautiful autographed picture that he signed for her at the time they made the movie together. She really loved him. And I played this for her when we met. Anyway, of course, here's When It's Sleepy Time Down South. when it's sleepy time down south. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Yeah, how about that jazz, Julia? That. uh, I'm not done quite yet. I'll have to play uh, the aside from When the Saints Go Marching In. This is probably the most famous of all the jazz or ragtime pieces to come out of New Orleans. And it was first recorded by the original Dixieland Jazz Band in 1917. They are usually given credit as the composers of the piece. Jelly Roll Morton also claimed he composed it. Of course, he claimed that he invented jazz itself. So I'm not sure if you could trust what he said, but he had a very unique version of the song. And I'm talking about Tiger Rag, of course, sometimes known as Hold That Tiger. And I used to play Jelly Roll's arrangement of the song, but I decided to kind of come up with my own. And I performed this arrangement of it at the Old Time Piano Championship about 10 years ago. And it was the biggest video of me on YouTube, I think, playing the piano. With the most views, that is. It had reached 500,000, 500,000. And unfortunately, the man that put the video up took it down. But I still like to say it's my biggest hit, Tiger Rag. And my arrangement of this owes a little bit to my good friend Marty Mincer from Iowa, who takes the first part of Tiger Rag and plays it in a minor key. Anyhow, here it goes. Andy, I'm glad you mentioned that. He said Dick would approve. He's talking about the late Dick Krekel. Yeah, I borrowed a little bit of that from him too. He had one of the great tiger roars, of anybody I'd ever heard. Uh, I didn't really intend for that to be the finale yet. I want to do one more thing for you. And I've mentioned Louis Armstrong a couple of times in the broadcast tonight, and so I want to do a couple of songs just specifically about the great Louis Armstrong, who was one of the most wonderful people that ever came out of New Orleans. And I'm going to do a couple of the songs that he made famous later on in his career when he became an international star and made movies and so forth. And they're a little bit contemporary, really, compared to the style of a lot of the other songs that I play. But a lot of people misunderstand me when I talk about music. It doesn't matter what year a piece was written. What matters is if it's a good piece of music, has a real melody and sort of regular tonal harmony. And these are songs that just make everybody happy. So I'm going to do a medley of two of them. Both of these are from the 1960s and were international hits for Louis Armstrong. We'll do Hello Dolly and then wind up with What a Wonderful World. How does that sound? All right, I thought that'd be a nice song to close the night with, folks. Thank you very much for tuning in. And my friend was mentioning how Johnny would talk about how they stopped writing music with a melody. Well, for the most part, they did. The great songs like that are few and far between to me in the more recent decades. But anyhow, thank you all for tuning in. And if you can leave a virtual tip, I sure appreciate it. I intend to be here next week, Sunday night at the same time. I might skip a week. I'm not sure yet, depending on what other things I have going on. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll talk to all of you very soon. Good night.